Good morning and welcome everyone to FEO Tuesday Talks. This is Supply and Demand. I'm your host, Kyle Sipkens, and today we're going to be covering a really important topic. We're going to be talking about event crisis management, and we have a great guest with us today. Just a reminder that the session today is going to be recorded. It's going to be posted later, but we just want to dive right into it because there's so much to talk about. So joining us today, we have Scott Ashley from Get Ready. So Scott, thank you so much for joining us. Instead of reading your bio, it's probably easier to have you introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks, Kyle. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to, talk about emergency management and emergency response and, trying to minimize the impact of some of these things that happen. I'm the president and co-founder of Get Ready. We are a preparedness, response, and recovery organization. We have about 45 employees, police, fire, military, bomb techs, critical care, things like that. And we have a whole team of developers and the CIO and software. So, what we've tried to do, and for many years, I was a paramedic out west in Alberta and then down in Los Angeles. I went to school and trained and worked in LA and came back to Ontario, where I'm from originally. And I worked with Toronto EMS. And for 8 years, I was a critical care flight paramedic on Bandage 1, the orange helicopter out of Sunnybrook. And, every time we went to a situation, it always seemed that nobody knew what to do. And there was never a plan. There was never, calling we're going to call 911. Well, calling 911 is not a plan. It may be part of your plan, but it's not the plan. And I think it's really important for people to think about what can they do, before the ambulance arrives, before the fire department or the police or whatever. And there's quite a bit, that can be done. And what we try and do is make it simple. So, that's really what we're all about and my background. And, as we go through this today, this isn't, just to sort of set the stage, this isn't really me presenting to you guys. This is a conversation. And so if you have any questions, if you, it's like, hey, what about this or what about that? Or, I would encourage you to ask any questions or, we can pause in the middle of stuff. I've only got about 10 slides and we'll kind of use those as speaking points to keep us on track. But let's talk about what your needs are and how we can make your events and your festivals safer and happier for everyone involved. So maybe we'll get the slideshow just to sort of start here.
Yeah, of course.
So anyways, Get Ready. If you get a minute, check out our website. It's getreadyglobal.com. And, but we'll go to the next couple slides here. We'll just sort of blast through these. Our goal is to create disaster resilient organizations. So they have a sense of what to do, how to do it. They're trained, they're prepared, and they're ready to go. And we make everything available instead of on paper and binders. We put it through our cloud-based application so you can get it on desktop, laptop, or mobile devices and all the information. The next thing is, and we can just start talking here a little bit and get some comments from other people here. Tell us or tell me about what your existing emergency management program is, or what it looks like, how it works. Are you happy with it? What kind of challenges, do you see or have? What are the goals? These are the kinds of things. What's happening right out there today in your world, and previous events you've just had or you're planning for, later on this year or next year.
Yeah. So, if anybody has anything that they want, like any questions that pop up, feel free to pop it in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and we'll be happy to look at those.
I think one of the things to do is, and we talk about sort of the steps to success here, but how do we do this? So, create a list of relevant incidents that you think might potentially occur, or you should be prepared to have plans in place. So, the typical, if there's a medical emergency, if there's a missing person, if there's a fire, something like that. But, do you have something for extreme weather? If a tornado was announced and what's the plan and where do people go? If you had power failure or power outage, utility failures, what's the backup or what are we going to do? What's your crisis communication plan? How can you, if something happened, how can you, get information out? One of the notions in planning around crisis communication is your reputation, and how do you stay ahead of the incident? With social media and everyone having a phone, if someone gets injured, the information goes out quickly. How do you stay ahead of that? Well, one of the things that we've done is we have a lot of different pre-drafted messages for social media, for your website, for communications to stakeholders, to, customers, visitors, suppliers, vendors, whatever, so that you can, get information out in a timely manner and not have to wait. And that really makes a big difference. One of the other things we do, and we've spent a lot of time, we've done this forever with hospitals and large corporations and smaller groups and municipal governments and so on, is we separate policies from procedures. You might have a great policy on emergency response or on fire plans or whatever, but at the end of the day, when the fire alarm's going off, people don't care what the policy is. What they care about is, what am I supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? And it's like lines in a play. And what we develop are job action sheets. So if you're a staff member, this is what you do. If you're a supervisor, this is what you do. If you're a manager, if you're an area manager, if you're security, if you're the lead or communications or the liaison or the media representative, if you're working with volunteer groups at the event, what are they going to do? So we create these job action sheets so everybody has a process, and we also incorporate an escalation. So do we have a fire alarm going off with no signs of smoke, or do we actually have a working fire with people evacuating an area? Because your responses are going to be different. If you had a bomb threat versus finding a suspicious package, oftentimes we see code blacks and stuff with municipalities and government agencies and hospitals. They'll combine a bomb threat and a suspicious package. Well, your response is entirely different if you had a suspicious package that was found versus if you received a bomb threat. If there was an active shooter or the potential of one in the community, how will you lock down? How will you know when everyone's locked down? Anyways, these are the kinds of things that we do and we plan for. We look at the training needs. We provide tutorial training. We also can run an exercise so that when you bring your people together, they can practice, a situation where they get to know each other and have their confidence. Anyways, that's an area that we do. Do people now, do you guys get training for your staff on emergency procedures, or do you practice with the local police, fire, ambulance, or if you had a volunteer Red Cross or St. John ambulance or someone like that, do you get a do you do a tabletop or anything like that? Anybody? Well, let's go on here and we'll.
I know some folks are. Oh yes, Andrew with the CNE says yes, both. Andrew, I don't know if you're willing to jump on and comment a little bit more. I know some people are in offices, so they may not have the opportunity to speak a bit, but I'll give Andrew a moment here. Oh,
sorry, just be clear to kind of come in both. Depending on the time of year, we try to do at least one of them. Goals to do both. What are some mock exercises, and people pop with at least the core team. I believe on your website you can call it the EOCs, or those members we call the the emergency response team, or the leads that we have in the department. So yeah, we do both. To kind of get ready for our event, right? Because as you know, with the CED, we're concentrated. Things really ramp up for us for August, so it's not like we're preparing for threats or emergencies throughout the year, right? We kind of just ramp up for our event in August and make sure that we have our plans down for that. So yeah, we try to do one or the other. Sometimes twice. Usually we'll have one kind of in late spring, and then we'll have one in early spring.
Okay. And Andrew, I couldn't hear very well, but how do you train your staff in the procedures that they need to follow for different types of emergency situations?
Well, we've kind of got a living document that's evolved over the years, so that's kind of what we reference, and then we also call it former emergency officers from child police and EMS will come on and
And when is this just regarding the Canadian National Exhibition, or is this for the CNE grounds, for the Indy race and stuff like that? Is that included?
Not
Okay. Okay, fair enough. Well, that's great. Anybody else? Otherwise, I'll show you what we've done here. The goal was, sorry, is there a question?
No. Sorry, I was just saying. Yeah, great. we can.
Yeah, no, thanks, Andrew. So just the next one here, if you go to the next slide. What we've tried to do is to create very clear, simple, easy job action sheets. It's like lines in a play. Here's what you do. Here's what you do based on your role. And, so the executive might be talking to community stakeholders, the media. Other people are doing more tactical response. They're treating the patient. They're meeting the ambulance. They're, managing the crowd, different things like that, right? And then we put this on a cloud-based web application. So if you go to the next screen, next slide here. And even the next one here, I'll show you. We're a partner with the National Research Council of Canada because of our innovation. And this is to get rid of the paper and binders, go digital, and get the information right on someone's phone. And so we put on right on your phone, we have all the procedures. And, it's simple like this. So communication plans are on there, site maps, the floor plans. We can have camera feeds, links. We have all the forms are digital. So if there's a medical form or a post-incident or a spill or missing person or a description, of someone who's, the abductor or something like that, or the missing person, all of that information can be added. Even with a click of the phone, we can have a picture included on that that can be sent immediately out to everybody. But if you go to the next screen, you'll see here how this works. And it's really simple. Call for help. Pick the emergency type, click on it, and your role. And so this is all customizable in the language and everything, but here's just an example. So, here you can see on the left side of the screen, we have a code amber, let's say, near the bottom, or code yellow near the bottom there, missing person, missing child. And then you would click in the middle once you click that, and then you click on your role. Are you switchboard staff, security, the team, a department lead, manager, whatever? Could be parking, could be all kinds of different things. Click, and on the right-hand side here is your checklist. And so, for example, I need to do this, I need to do this, ding, 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 I'm done. If you go to the next slide then, Kyle, let's say you had 10 areas within your festival or event, and you had the parking, east and west parking or something like this, and you had food services, and you had a stage, and different things. Each of those areas could very quickly, on their job action sheet, click the link. It opens up the missing person. They pick their department or their location, and this is all customizable, and we do this before we onboard it to you. They click on that, and then they say, I've checked the public areas, I've checked the washrooms, I've checked the stairs, I've checked, ding, 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 whatever. And again, that can be customizable depending on your event, depending on your location and what you have. And then there's a key question. Did you find the missing person? Yes or no, or we need help. And you pick one of those three, you hit submit, and you're done. On the right-hand side, where the pie graph is, if you were a manager, if you're in charge, if you're working with the city or the municipality or whoever, you're seeing live in real time the status of these searches. So if police are arriving to help look, or you're considering calling a code amber or something like that, or you need, there's a fire and the fire department's responding? Is everybody evacuated? Oftentimes the fire truck pulls up and, the captain or engineer sticks their head out the window and says, is everyone out of the building? And the response, that we see so many times is, I don't know, not sure. Some people went out the one side of the building, some people went out the other. I don't know if they're all out. The question is, where do we send our firefighters first? And no one knows. With this tool, we did an exercise one time. It took an hour and a half for the client to get the information from evacuating 50 different departments. And when we used the app, it took 7 minutes.
Wow.
Which manager do you want to be? The one with the rapid information or the one that's taken all day? And so again, it gives you as the person in charge access to real-time information so that you can make proper decisions, in a timely manner. You're not also phoning everybody. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? All your members, all your board, different groups, whatever the hierarchy and infrastructure is within your event, they can be given access to these kinds of dashboards, so they know what's going on. Maybe the mayor, is aware that we've had a fire, we've had a problem. So whatever that is, okay. Anyways, that's really at the end of the day how this works. And if you go to the next slide, Kyle, that's my contact information, and please, reach out or whatever. But I thought, we'd try to open this up a little bit here. We have some time, and I wanted to, see how people felt. Is this an area that you think, some of the conversations we've had with different groups, they sometimes feel they don't have the expertise in-house. Sometimes they feel they're relying on the local community, police, fire, EMS to help them with their plans. And while that's reasonable, I don't know how good, I've seen different plans over the years, of course, but I don't know how it helps you and your staff specifically know what to do when something happens. And I think it's that kind of thing. It's also that immediate situational reporting that we can do with the digital tools, as opposed to the binders and sending runners and people trying to phone each other and stuff like that. So maybe we could if you wouldn't mind, I'd be curious, how you guys find this aspect of your event and festival planning and, response.
Yeah. So if anybody has a comment there, feel free to either type it in the chat or pop it. I think Dave's ready to jump in here. So go ahead, Dave.
A good presentation, Scott. And I think the biggest thing I feel is that, a lot of our events and organizations, they do have somewhat of a safety plan, but I think a lot of times they think about farming it out. Okay, I've got EMS on site, I've got security, but that's the end of it. There's not a conversation. There's not debriefs before and after shifts and passing on the information. And that communication and line is so important. And I mean, if you do have an incident, and sometimes if it's with the AGCO or whatever, you might not hear about it for a couple of months. And if you don't have a detailed debrief of what happened with the incident and
Right.
all of that information in timely fashions, you're forgetting a lot of information and you're liable for a lot of things. You can't just pass those off, right?
Well, no. And, it's interesting when you have different agencies come in. If EMS comes in, they're going to say, here's what we're going to do for medical emergencies. If you get a bomb threat, they're going to say evacuate, but they're not going to tell you how to evacuate or where to evacuate to, that kind of thing. So, these are the areas that you need specific instructions for these different types of occurrences. And we found over the years, EMS's role isn't to do that. The fire department's role isn't to do that, to provide you with, working usable plans. They're going to talk about where they're going to stage, where they're going to arrive, where they're going to, access the water mains and so on, fire, for fire protection and stuff. They might do a walkthrough before a large event. I'm sure, with, something the size of the C&E, Andrew. I'm sure you have all kinds of stuff going on pre-opening, but again, what exactly are your procedures? So, a missing person, what do you do? Like, and it's not always what do you do? What exactly do you do? And what will you send out in the social media? How will you respond to the situation? We had a client one time, it was a school board, and I'll just give you a scenario of in 3 minutes how things got completely out of control. It was an elementary school, and a parent called the school board saying, or the school, I guess, and then ultimately the school board and whatever, and a bunch of people started calling, but that there was a shooting at the school. And there was a big panic because a bunch of kids had sent social media and to their parents and different people saying that there was a shooting, gunshots. Well, there wasn't gunshots. It was a truck that backfired. And but in the news, there had been a recent school shooting in the U.S. or whatever, and these kids heard about it, and they thought it was a gunshot. Well, the school couldn't confirm that there was a gunshot. The board couldn't confirm. The trustees, the superintendents, nobody knew. They didn't have social media to send out, we're investigating, we're doing this, we're doing that. And what was a simple backfire or several backfires of a vehicle, a car or truck or whatever it was, turned into just a complete social nightmare and a panic of many, many parents and, school board officials and so on. So, what is your response? And so I think, it's great that you have good relationships, certainly with your police and fire and EMS services. But I also think, sometimes your specific plans need to be very focused so that you, as an organization, as an event, know what to do while working with them or not and communicating it out, right?
And Scott, it's not a one step to all, right? I mean, a lot of us have 500 or 1,000 volunteers on different events. So, that person on the street or frontline person is not going to get as in-depth a training as a team leader, for example.
No, absolutely.
But they have to know,
well,
how do you escalate problems and how do you communicate those problems?
Yeah, you want your frontline people probably not to do too much, quite frankly, other than let their supervisor know. Whatever title or role that is or where they are, whether that's yelling over, hey, we need help, or getting on a two-way walkie-talkie or something like that, but it's going to be your unit managers, whatever those are, whether it's backstage, audience, parking, food court, food services, or it's a larger, event where you've got multiple buildings and, thousands of people and different entrance points, east, west, north, whatever, transit, but it's those defined areas that you could say, searched and clear. We did not find a bomb. Clear. Next one. We did not find a missing kid, a missing person, an elderly person or whatever. Or we've had a medical emergency. Someone's had a heart attack, a stroke, whatever, they've collapsed, and we're starting, care. Excuse me, maybe the local volunteer, maybe Red Cross, maybe St. John's is there to help. Maybe the EMS is on their way. Maybe there's a staging area. What's the transportation to move somebody through the crowd? Do they have golf carts kind of thing, or are you going to lead the ambulance to that location? Those are the kinds of things you want to be thinking about. It's really going to come down to the practical. What exactly are we going to do if that happens? If you had a chemical spill, hazardous material, big cleaning, tank, drum of stuff for cleaning, quite toxic, but nothing crazy, but toxic, and it spills. What do you do? How do you keep everyone away? And suddenly everyone's going, oh, we have a big environmental impact, and this and this and this, and you're trying to think, wait a second here, we're just trying to get the crowd away. Do we put a boom around this? Do we call the fire department? Do we have that kind of equipment? Does anyone have that training? So, these are things we want to consider. If the lights go out, at 8 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night or whatever, and it's dark, what kind of backup lighting is there? What kind of backup power is there? Suddenly everyone's on their cell phone, walking around with the flashlight turned on. Is that enough? That's the kind of thing you want to be planning for a bit and considering.
Well, it's interesting. Your first story is kind of a perfect metaphor because the lack of planning is the ultimate backfire. Like that's where you don't have anywhere to go to.
We've seen this so many times, where we've gone or responded to, industry or schools or, sporting arenas or whatever. And no one really knows what to do. They just they have a policy. We believe in doing the right thing and protecting everybody and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes down to it, what exactly does that security officer do? What exactly does the security manager do? What does the staff do? The supervisor, the manager, the unit, the department manager, all the way up to the, the executive team or, your leadership, whatever structure or, how that works. What do they do? And that's where we find this falls down.
Well, and it's clear, at least like from your presentation, like it's clear that you saw a need firsthand and really putting the resource in people's pockets. Because I mean, when I worked in the past and, like even in retail stores, we had an emergency plan in a binder that was about this thick.
Yeah.
But, it would take probably as much time to go through that binder and try to find what it is exactly that you need. So,
well, or we see this a lot too, is where people will take that big policy document and they'll try to read through 20, 30, 50, 80 pages quickly and kind of go, well, from this, I kind of get, you should do this and you should do that. And these guys are going to do that. And any questions? In the meantime, we don't know if it's right. We don't know if they're going to do that at the same time tomorrow when the same thing happens. There's no standardized, no one's vetted or tried or tested the plans. And so typically what we'll do is we'll look at the situation, we'll develop the procedures around, these are the kinds of events you're going to have, probably. Boom. There's 10 different types of events, let's just say. Fires, floods, spills, bombs, medicals, floods, weather, missing people, stuff like that. That's standard stuff. Do you have the 5, different roles of people that are going to be there? Do you have the communications that are going to go out? And do you have the chain of command to deal with your outside agencies? So if are we calling 911 from here? Are we calling the police directly? Do they have an officer at the site who's now more of an incident commander and can access police directly? Or do we need to go through that? Do we have the fire department? Those are the kinds of things you want to have planned out ahead of time. What does your response look like? And even the testing and talking, even if it's not a full-blown tabletop, it's always interesting, when we talk to people, what do you think the response time is of the fire department or police or EMS? And most people will say, well, geez, there's a fire station just around the corner. True. But are they in the station or are they at a house fire 4 blocks the other way? And suddenly the people responding are now responding from across town. Or do you have a volunteer service, in your community? Or is the backup a volunteer base? Well, if that's the case, it's 20 minutes. How many police, when you say we need police, how many police do you need? 1 cruiser, 2, 5? Again, if you're in a regional police service in a metropolitan area, you're probably going to get pretty fast response. Toronto EMS, for example, their plan is to be at the site address location in less than 10 minutes, 90% of the time. That's their goal. So 10 minutes to the scene, it might be another 5 minutes, 10 minutes to the patient. So you might be doing patient care for more than 10 minutes. Do you have first aid kits? Have you talked to your staff? Do they know what to do? Would they know how to start CPR or use an AED? Or do they know how to stop bleeding? The critical things that are going to, if someone's broken their ankle, well, if the ambulance arrives in 5 minutes or 25 minutes, the guy's going to survive. But if the guy's in cardiac arrest or he's choking and can't breathe or he's bleeding badly, it's a severe, critical bleed. You need intervention before those paramedics arrive. So these are the kinds of things that these are some of the realities that we see. So, you need to make sure you think about your plan. And anyways, I'd be curious, just as well, Kyle, what are the costs? What do people pay for stuff like this? Is this, if we helped you build a program for your event, then ultimately this is something that you could, tweak from year to year. So the initial costs are kind of the initial setup and onboarding. and customizing and putting in your site maps and floor plans and things like that. But ultimately, if you kind of run the same event, year after year, there's not a lot of updates. And if there are, those are usually minimal, and your people get used to it. So I'm just wondering if just a show of hands or yes, no, or something. Do people think that this is something interesting? Is this something that would be helpful to you? Let us know what you're thinking.
Well, and Jay's got a great idea there. Just in the chat, just give us a ballpark of what your organization spends on emergency planning, just to give us an idea on what you spend now. I don't know, Dave. I don't know if you had something.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and 2 points. Number one, when you have your training and everything, it's in ideal situations. And the one piece of the equation is that's not there is the stress of the situation, right? So, I mean, you tend to forget a lot of that stuff. And being an events-driven organization, maybe that's something that we can work with you guys on, is that, here's a sort of a script and an emergency plan for a run-based, sporting-based event. Here's a concert and musical venue type event. Here's a downtown community center event. And, so I've seen a lot of great things in the past that, and I'm going to use the example of a bike race where, on site, there's a command center set up that everything goes through that command center, and in there is the police, the EMS, the team leaders, that all communications going through that command center. Their district, they've got people set out along the courses and stuff like that. So I'm wondering if that's something that as an organization we could work with you guys on and come up with sort of here's 6 templates for the event world.
Yeah. No, hey, listen, there's a big difference between a Terry Fox marathon, run kind of thing in a community covering many, many miles in areas versus a very defined building and concert, or a larger, fairgrounds where there's, different events and of course, with Andrew speaking up there from the CNE, that's a big venue. Lots of moving parts, obviously. In fact, Andrew, it's funny, there's a Toronto ambulance station. I forget the number of it now, but years ago I was actually stationed out of the CNE grounds in that one Toronto EMS base. So I know it well. But anyways, I think maybe, Dave, that's something that might be really relevant. And then we could say, here's sort of the templates. Here's the standard sort of operating procedures. Maybe we can customize it with your site maps, your floor plans, your community contact list, your emergency, contacts and stuff like that. The beauty of this is, and I'll sort of finish with this point, and I'm happy to talk about anything else, but what we found is the simplicity is in the app. And I joke with our programmers all the time, but it has to be ATM simple. If you can get money out of a bank machine, you're going to be a rock star on this. In other words, pick the emergency type, pick your position, and click on it, and there's your role. So the training is minimal. If you can get it on your phone, call, pick, and click, then there's your procedure. That's what you follow. So we don't need to spend hours and hours and hours on training. There's the procedure. And we can even include that right down to first aid. If you had a heart attack, click. Here's how you do CPR. Here's how you do choking. Click, click, click. All the way down. Here's how you put a tourniquet on. Stop bleeding. You have an infant who's choking or something like that. What do you do? Someone's having an allergic reaction. How do you give an EpiPen? We have all of that information in very bite-sized pieces. And so it's like, how do I do this? I don't know. Click. There's a 30-second video that shows you exactly what to do in a bullet step. Remove the blue cap, jab to the outside of the thigh, hold for 10 seconds, click, 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 click. Right? Because like you say, and they're called perishable skills. People take first aid and CPR training, and lots of organizations have done lots of studies, but the typical response is within 6 months, you've probably forgotten almost half of what you learned if you don't practice it. And fortunately, we don't have to practice it. Unfortunately, when there's a problem, we're not very prepared.
It's like an insurance policy, right? You don't know how good it is until you have to use it.
Entirely. So that kind of stuff is what we could have. So Dave, I would be curious to talk to you about that, but I think it would also be really interesting to see if, if Kevin, if you guys, or Olga, Catherine, if having a tool like that would in your minds, if that would be useful for bringing on your volunteers, getting your people going.
So Kevin's raised his hand there. So Kevin, feel free to jump in.
Hi, Kevin.
Kevin, you may be on mute. We'll just give Kevin a second there.
While we're waiting for Kevin, Scott, you brought up another interesting point. You talked about the response time in Toronto. And I know I was working with a number of chambers of commerce because they felt that their city was in a disadvantage because, an event happening in Toronto would only need 15 off-duty police officers, where something happening in Kitchener, for example, might need 60. And, I talked to the chief of police in Kitchener, and it was, well, Dave, here's the reason. It's because in Toronto, with 15 people at an event, they could have 30 officers there within 5 minutes redeployed from the street, whereas in Kitchener, we don't have that critical mass. And in order to, and yet again, like an insurance policy, that event that I'm talking about specifically, where I had 60 officers, they did have a weather event. They did have to clear the venue. And thank God they had 60 officers there to do that, because it did happen seamlessly and flawlessly. But, as an organizer, and we talk to each other, and we're comparing our security costs and everything else. So it does make a difference in what sort of city center you are and what kind of response time that police or emergency services have.
Yeah, it really does matter. So, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll give Kevin a chance there. I think he.
Yeah, sorry. Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Yep. Sweet. Thanks. Thanks, Scott. I think, so just my background. So right now I work for the city of Hamilton, helping out with some of the major events that we have come to the city. So we've done the Grey Cup, Heritage Classic. We've got the Grey Cup again. I do Canada Day, some other civic events. And then in previous roles, I was a manager of logistics for the Toronto International Film Festival, downtown Toronto.
Yep.
So obviously emergency management was a massive part of that. And did all the tabletop exercises with police and their emergency operations center and everything. So I think, the biggest issue that I've always found with emergency management planning is that communication piece across the breadth of the event that people that need to know it, right? Like there's the key members at the top that I'm having, like there's our management that's having meetings with the EOC or with emergency management, and then communicating that out to everybody. And I think that's where this app completely makes sense, right? That form of communication. But I think it comes down to, and it always seems that emergency management is kind of on the back burner for a lot of people, where obviously it's so important, but it is a what if. And you have these plans in place, but our events are stressful as is, right? The operations of running an event, that people have to know what to do just to operate the event. And then these what if scenarios kind of fall off of people's plates or their care, right? Which shouldn't be the case, but it is that time frame to communicate how you actually do it so people know what to do. And then the cost, like you said, like what is the cost? So I've never outsourced the emergency management plans. It's always been in-house and then consulting with emergency services. But I've done those tabletop exercises and everything. But I guess it comes down to, would I be able to convince budgetary people who hold the budget to be able to do this? And it depends on that cost. I guess I'm just rambling at this point, but it is an extra cost for something that is almost not as looked upon as important as it should be, I guess. Like,
well, and listen, I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to either point fingers or save the world here. I'm trying to think about, can we make a difference? Can we make this easier? I'm wondering maybe in terms of, any statistics. Do you know, and each of you with your own different events, have you been able to collect any kind of statistics? Have you had missing kids? Have you had people with heart? Like, how many medical calls, would you get at a typical day at the CNE? How many, missing persons, or how many people stuck by a bee? Or
City of Hamilton, Canada Day, we had, I think, 3 missing children throughout the event. It was just a one day, and they were resolved within 20 to 25 minutes. But I don't have like that's me because I was there dealing with it. That's an anecdotal statistic, not, I don't have reporting like you would have through that app. So I do think that would be extremely beneficial to have, and the buy-in from everybody. I'm wondering if I could get budget to do something like that.
Well, and because and the other thing is, and Dave, this might be something to consider as well with the association, but it's the mitigation of risk and what's the impact on your insurance premiums for these events and stuff like that. I think if we could say, the average, whether it's the Elmira Syrup Festival or the Midland Butter Tart Festival, or some of these much larger events in Toronto and Ottawa and Hamilton and London and wherever, how many things happen? What is the cost of that? Is there a fire? Is there a risk? If we had an active shooter, what's the deal? Do we have some procedures in place? If we had to evacuate or we had extreme weather, what do we do? So I'm wondering, maybe as part of this, now we have what's called a post-incident form, and it's literally one digital screen. You hit it on the button and you pick the location, the nature of the problem. Was it, a fire, a flood, a spill, a bomb, whatever? Click, 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 click. Pick the one. Did you have proper or adequate procedures in place? Yes or no? Comment. Did you have the right equipment to do your job adequately, properly, whatever, yes, no, comment. And did you have the right training? Yes or no? Boom, 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 boom. They can take a picture or a few pictures of whatever the problem was. Someone fell off scaffolding, and the lights backstage of a concert, whatever it is. And then they hit submit. And you, as the organizers, Kevin and Olga and Andrew and everybody here, you guys would be able to print the analytics and say, over a 10-day period, we had 7 missing kids and 5 heat strokes and 3 grease fires, in the kitchen or whatever. And then, and then we start looking at those and what's the cost and how can we bring this down? And if we could reduce our incidents by 10%, does that impact our insurance or this or that? If you're recruiting volunteers or people, organizations, is it easier for them to, in Barrie, I think of the festival they have, I think it's on Canada Day, and they have lots of vendors and crafts and stuff down at the Barrie waterfront. Is it easier to entice those folks to come if they know it's a safer event or your security is integrated with the local police or whatever? The crowd management and stuff. People are anxious about that kind of stuff these days, right?
There's a lot of takeaways that I'm learning in this conversation because, obviously I've been in the event industry a long time, but, and specifically getting in depth on this topic, it's that emergency planning is not a one size fits all. And as you were saying earlier, if there's unneeded steps, like if you're doing an outdoor event and, you're going through steps asking, have you checked any stairwells? Like, those are unnecessary steps. Right. And also in scalability. So, for something like a municipality, they may have different events that they require different considerations for. But, in terms of the app, it sounds like it's important to get that app in the hands of as many people as possible. So what, with your app, how many devices, how many users?
Well, it's a web app. It's a web app. It's web application. So basically we can, whether it's, Android or iOS, we can onboard and push the app to the user, and they're given access. And when the event's done, we can remove that access. So from a security perspective, people aren't walking around with all of your procedures on their phones forever. They're on for the event and we can remove it. They can be sent tutorials ahead of time. There can be a whole onboarding process before you get the app. You get this, and did you sign up, and have you, completed the paperwork that each of the events maybe has people sign. If they're going to volunteer or be a staff or paid or whatever. There's probably some agreement in place.
Right.
They do that, and then you're protected from a liability perspective, and then they can be onboarded. They watch the tutorials. They can be sent to everybody's phone or email, and they can watch it on their laptop or desktop or whatever. If you are doing an orientation with your team leaders or managers, supervisory staff, you can run 5 scenarios. We do with large corporations right now. We'll do what we call a 10-minute exercise, and they love it because every month we walk into every single department, with different pharmaceutical companies and manufacturing and stuff. We'll walk in and go, attention everyone, just stop doing your job there for a minute. It's kind of a lunch and learn thing. We'll bring some muffins and stuff like that, but we'll say, okay, the fire alarm just went off. Go. What are you going to do?
Right.
And they have 3 minutes to tell us where they're, where the pole stations are, where the fire extinguishers are, where the exits are, where they're going to go to, what is their staging location, and what are the alternates. If that stairwell was blocked, where else would you go? And da 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 da. And then we stop. And then supervisor, okay, who are you going to call? What are you going to do? And the whole thing's over in 10 minutes. So it's an easy thing to do online. It's an easy thing to do in person. You could get your volunteer staff. You might have 100 people or whatever. Listen, I grew up in Kitchener, so I know about Oktoberfest, and over the years, that's a big event, and lots of different people and lots of different venues. Whether it's Queensmount Arena or Moses Springer or the parade or whatever, a lot of stuff going on. But if people simply said, okay, medical emergency, boom, 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 fire, boom, 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 flood, boom, 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 extreme weather, missing person, some sort of threat, what are we going to do? Then people have an idea, and that you create confidence. If you don't know that, if you don't intrinsically have any sense of your response, you just have panic.
Right. It's that game show scenario of, you're watching something from the outside on a game show and you're going, oh my gosh, I can solve that. It's so easy, but when you're there in the moment,
you're front and center.
Exactly.
So, well, this is, listen, I know I want to be mindful of everyone's time here too, but, Bonnie and Dave and everyone, Kyle, Jay, we should have a conversation after this, but if anyone has any questions or wants to add to this conversation, maybe we could, come up with a couple options, and if you wouldn't mind, maybe we could send them out and say, would you be interested if in a service that offered this, and that, would you, that kind of thing, or would you be interested in helping to gather some statistics so we can have some information, because maybe that can impact the insurance premiums that you guys are all paying. And let's face it, with all these hurricanes and the costs of disasters, we're just looking at insurance rates to be going up, right? So anything we can do to help control that's going to be helpful.
And Kevin does have a question here, so I'm going to let Kevin jump in here.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, have you gone to municipalities like emergency management departments, I guess, to talk about this? Because I'm wondering, because we have an emergency management division at Hamilton that I work with on a lot of events, and they've got a template plan to fill out, and we work with them to make sure it works for each event specifically. But I'm wondering if you've seen interest from like that level.
That's an interesting thing. We actually haven't. What we have been doing with municipalities is implementing their EOC, their Emergency Operations Center programs. Most of the municipalities across the province and the country, for that matter, are all based on IMS, which is called the Incident Management System. And it's what the US uses, what Canada used, and it was sort of brought in North America wide after 9/11 to make sure that all levels of government, federal, military, provincial, municipal, and even down to the private sector, and some of our larger organizations like Hydro One and things like that, we're all talking the same language. So they brought in this IMS system. Well, it's a good system, but most of it's in paper. And when you're in a COVID environment and everyone's moving around, and even not COVID, when you're remote, your binder's not doing you anything. Where if you can fill out your time your checklists, your forms, and they can be viewed by others, then it becomes real-time data and real-time updates. And so we've got a number of municipalities now, we're talking to them, but I think, Kevin, to your question and stuff, that would be, I think if we could do something as an organization, through festivals and events and say, look, I think we've got an angle here, then, we have the horsepower to, work with you guys to go to different municipalities and talk to their, emergency services for sure.
And I think this is really just the start of a conversation here. Like you were saying, that can be done, just a broader conversation that can happen. We are getting close to the end of our time. So I do want to ask Scott if there's anything else that you want to share, or if anyone else has another question that they want to ask before we wrap up today.
I'm good. If anyone else has any other questions or any other ideas or thoughts on this, but I sure do appreciate the time. And I just think it's a problem that hasn't been solved. And it's not just with festivals. It's with schools. It's with universities. It's with businesses. It's with transit. It's a major professional sports venues. What do you do when you have this situation?
Well, it sounds like this idea really came from, you being firsthand on the other side of it. You lived in the what ifs.
Right.
Anytime there was a what if scenario,
that's
where you came in.
Yeah. So it was sad and it was surprising, and it would be like, well, don't you guys have a plan for this? No.
Right.
And you're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I think there's a need. And again, listen, we need to make it simple. We need to make it achievable. So it's like, got it. And that's always been our goal. And that's why we continue to drive down to these simple checklists and lines in a play. Here's your role, here's your role, here's your role, here's your role. Break, and everyone sort of heads out with a plan. And we've got clients, we've got sites that have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people using this system, and they love it. We've had, we did a program with Trillium Hospital, for example, and they did a survey of 14,000 employees, and they had about 32% confidence rating when they did this survey. And it was 3 or 4 questions. What do you think? How would you rank your own ability to respond as an employee? How would you think your department and the organization's ability to respond to emergencies? And they ended up with a 32%. And after we implemented the program, it was 84%. And that was a massive increase. And the executive team saw it as a huge win.
Right.
And just building that confidence. So again, what I'd be interested in as well is the study that comes from that. So what kind of incident rate are we getting now? And we can gather statistics. We can then, after 1 year, what are we getting? After 2 years, what are we getting? Is this making a difference? Is this saving lives? Is it reducing costs? All that kind of stuff, right? So.
Right. So, it's not only an important tool in preparation, but also then in information gathering to change your plan after.
Well, one of the things that surprised me, and this was something I learned a number of years ago, but NOAA, which is the National Atmospheric Agency or whatever in the US, kind of like Environment Canada here, they did a presentation, and from the time a tornado is spotted to the time it touches down is an average of 8 minutes.
Right.
If you don't have a plan, that 8 minutes is 1 second.
Right.
You don't know if you should move people away from windows or not, or into hallways or down the stairs. Everyone's always says, go to the basement. Well, what if there isn't a basement?
Right. Well, and emergency planning has changed a lot. Like I think of the number of events now that have vehicle deterrence. They have to have gates. They have to have, things that
limited access. And
that 10 years ago, was not the case, but it's constantly evolving because our world is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And in the end, what the cost is if we're not prepared.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, listen, folks, I can't thank you enough. I'm Debbie again. We've been talking for a while, and it's always been great. So thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that. And Dave, we've met before as well, and I appreciate the opportunity. And I wish all of you guys good luck with your programs, and any input, or if we can put some information together and send it out to you for comment, anything like that would be really appreciated. And let's see if we can't make something that's going to be really cost effective, easy to roll out, and hopefully reduce your risks, right?
That's great. Thank you so much, Scott. I know I've learned a lot today, and I'm sure everyone else has as well. And I see Debbie's popped in there, so I'm going to let her jump in because I know she's going to also want to let you know what is coming up in a little while.
So thanks again, Scott, for everything. This is really informative. Next week, we have Tuesday Talks with FEO, and we have Chris Bayless, who's a sponsorship expert, and he's going to be coming on board to discuss sponsorship in 2022 and beyond. So we're looking forward to that. That's it. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Kyle. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Jay. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And we will see you next week.